Hi. My name is Merritt Aho. I'm an optimization director at Search Discovery. We're an agency that uses data, or rather it helps companies transform their businesses using data to drive business impact. We're going to talk about vendor evaluations a little bit. Vendor evaluations are a huge pain, right? They can take up a lot of time. They can take up a lot of resources. They're one of those things that, you may start going down the road out of curiosity of what features and functionality are out there. And suddenly you've spent days, weeks communicating with sellers and second guessing yourself. And so you're going back and talking to other vendors, and suddenly you're, about to lay down $100,000 on a tool that you weren't necessarily planning on getting. Big point of frustration for people. Also something that not many people do very well. We get asked a lot at Search Discovery to help clients evaluate tools and decide which is the best one for their environment. Because let's be honest, a lot of these tools are very complex and very difficult to evaluate, right? They say the devil's in the detail. I'm a firm believer in that when it comes to technology. Because there are limitations, and sometimes you have to dig in pretty deeply to understand what those are. And sometimes you need to start with a pretty wide range of experience to be able to evaluate things on all facets. So I don't think they need to be as painful as they are, and I don't think we need to be as bad at them as we typically are. So the goal today is to give you some practical tools to evaluate your next optimization tool. Specifically, we're going to be talking about testing tools, testing optimization. That includes targeting and personalization. And I'm going to give you a framework, a document that you can actually take home and use for yourself and make your own. I'm showing a link to a shared document here, which hopefully you've caught on to. And you can open that up. Make sure you click File and save a copy so that you can really make the document your own and take notes and kind of monkey with it as we go along. But yeah, I want to make this as practical as possible, help you do it better. I will say, as human beings, you have to acknowledge that we don't always make good decisions. That's maybe unfair. We don't make rational decisions. We think we're making rational decisions, but oftentimes we're making emotional decisions, and we're using facts and data and information to justify and rationalize those decisions. And these tool evaluations are really no different, I've seen. And it's important to be honest with yourself as you're going into things and try to suss out where your own emotions are maybe leading you. That could end up saving you time if you're willing to give into that early on. Or it could just be something that you choose to ignore and go and make a decision based on the data that you compile here. So it's really a bit of a choose your own adventure. Okay, with no further ado, we'll jump into the document here. Oops. No, that's not what I wanted to do. I really just want to get this bubble out of the way. I'm sure how to do that though. Okay, well, that's not going to work so well. So in this document, we have 5 tabs, I think. The one on the left, which you may not be able to see, is tips. The one next to it is comparison. That's where we're going to be spending the bulk of our time today going over. The next one over is vendor questionnaire. We'll talk about that. Next one is vendor contact list. I think it can be useful to have in one place all your information. And so, one thing to have handy in one place is the contact names of the people at the vendors that you're working with and how you can reach out to them and get answers in a quick manner. A part of the methodology here is to really control the conversation with the vendors. They're going to want to walk you through an entire process, and you may not have time for that. It may not always be efficient. So you really want to reach out to the vendor with questions as they arise and kind of fill in the gaps as the needs happen. And then there's a tab in here for links and documentation that can be really helpful One of the places you're going to want to start for a lot of these vendors is in their documentation, and see if you can understand that. And then this tab is not going to be in the link that you get. It's just a link to that document. Okay, so let's jump right in here. Here we go. Here is the main comparison tab. And we'll start by going over the columns in this tab. So I'm not showing you everything right now, and we'll kind of walk our way into it. But you've got here capability. All right, this is kind of like the short name for your requirements. You've got next to that description. This is the long description of your requirements. This could be in the form of a question. Does the vendor do this, that, and the other? You've got a priority column here. And I'm proposing that you use a simple priority column. Just do high, medium, and low. It's going to be really tempting to expand it beyond that, right? To say, oh, well, this thing's critical. And I mean, adjust your scale. Try to keep it simple. The broader your scale gets, the more fuzzy the differences between the ratings get, and the more difficult they can be to interpret. So use your priorities wisely. They will in turn impact the weight of each score that you get. And then we're going to go over here, and we're going to, we've got some dummy information here on a couple of vendors we'll get to, but the scores are going to be over on the right. There'll be a little bit more after that. So let's talk a little bit about the rating scale. So we call this a fitness rating scale, right? Fitness is how fitting is this tool for your environment and for your requirements. And it should always be put in the context of your needs, right? Not necessarily what anybody else needs or wants in a tool, but what you want and need. And it starts on a scale of 1, so no coverage, no feature, complete misfit. 5 is best in class feature, a perfect fit. And then you have scaling through the middle. 3 is kind of like, well, it's there. I guess we can make it work. 2 is could make it work, but it's really inadequate. 4 is it's built in, it's easy, it's a strong feature, and again, 5 is best in class, perfect fit. What you're really going to want to do is try hard to justify the ratings that you give or that the vendor gives, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I will say, again, it's very difficult to keep subjectivity out of this. You're going to find that different people have their favorites in tools, and you may end up, if you're doing this as a team, debating on some of the weightings and the ratings in here. And that's okay. You just have to work your way through those issues. Finally, there are 4 categories of requirements that I'm proposing. There's really 5, but the 5th is kind of a tack on. And those are core functions, technology fit, cost of ownership, and future ready. Core functions should be clear, right? Like, you're hiring a tool to do a specific job, and what is that job? And you got to make sure that it does that job and it does it well. Technology fit is more about the specific needs of your business, right? Put it in the context of the broader tech stack that you're working with. Cost of ownership covers everything from usability to actual cost to training to user base, and all the things that make a tool cheaper and easier to own over the long term. And then future ready, oftentimes there are features that we don't necessarily need right now, but we know we're going to need at some point, or we hope to mature our way into. That's where those sort of features go. So we're going to dive in deep, and I hope you're not frustrated by me kind of walking you through step by step. Again, you can grab that document and kind of open all this up and go through in detail. But so core functions, again, we start with the requirements. I would say one recommendation I have when you start gathering requirements is to involve a wide spectrum of people, right? Involve stakeholders, your business folks, your optimization specialists, involve your developers. In a lot of cases, it can be helpful to involve your network our IT folks, network architecture folks, network security folks, sometimes your procurement team. But the more people you have on the front end sort of helping you flesh out your requirements, the more prepared you're going to be, and the less circling back and correcting and chasing down additional information you're going to have to do. So I get that it's a bigger pain up front, but it does pay off in efficiency as you go through the entire process, because chances are you're going to need their input, or they're going to give it to you whether you want it or not at some point or other in the onboarding process. So again, core function, can it do A/B testing? Can it do a multi-page experiment site-wide? Can you store an audience profile? How good is the statistical engine? What kind of statistics does it use? Can it do audience targeting, whitelisting, blacklisting, multivariate experiments? Can it do auto allocation of traffic to the best variation? Developer options? Does it have a WYSIWYG? All that kind of stuff is in the core function, right? And then you see that we've marked over here in our priority column, you've got just 3 options: high, medium, low. And then those options impact the weight. So high doubles the weight, and you can customize this however you want, but high doubles the weight. And if we change this to medium, it just has a weighting of 1. And then low, you might be able to guess, it halves the weight. Now, the weighting is intended to be flexible, right? There's a default calculation in here, but sometimes it makes sense to alter that in some way. You may want to actually give a little bit more weight. So maybe instead of changing the priority, you maybe alter the weight a little bit. I'll show you one example of this. I think it's down here. Yeah. Okay, so down under future ready, we have 3 requirements that are related to machine learning for automated personalization, right? We've got like, does it do it, period. We've got how transparent is the model, if that's important to you. It is to me and many other people, right? You don't like the black box necessarily. You're not comfortable with that. And then how easy is it to customize the model, in particular the data that the model is using in order to make decisions, right? You really want to be able to whitelist the variables or the attributes that the model is using to make decisions to personalize. And so, a company that doesn't have a feature period, they're gonna, if all these are high, they're gonna lose out on a lot of points there. And that may be what you want, but in this case, we don't want that. So what we did is we took that high score of 2 and we divided it up into 3 different groups here. And it's helpful to sort of mark those, in this case with red ink, to show that end with a comment split score between the 3 criteria. So you can do that, and you should, try to make this model as customized as it needs to be for you and your team. Of course, what you're doing is the purpose of this is to go through and assign a score to each vendor on each row, right? And that score is 1 to 5, again, going back to the fitness rating. And then that score is multiplied by the weight to give you an adjusted score. I have some careful, don't change that formula warnings in here for you, just in case. Okay, so what you get here is you get an adjusted score. And then there's a column for notes in here. Now, to take a step back, I've got notes in here. They are dummy notes for 2 dummy companies, Agrodi Barjet and Cropped It Wisely. In no way intended to represent any vendors out in the market whatsoever. So don't read too far into this. Again, we've just put in some dummy information. Do not take it to heart or make any decisions based off of this, what you're seeing on the screen. But yeah, so what you get is you want to have to justify a rating. So, a 5 multi-page experimentation, that's a fairly standard requirement, but you want to make sure it's in there. These 2 get 5s. Again, like you want to, the work of this is going through and filling out all of this information and putting the ratings in. And then each subsection rolls up into a score that's based on a total number of points possible. right? So there's 5 points possible for every row in this column, and this gives you a 94% out of total because you missed 1, 2, 3 points out of the total here. And then adjusted is based on the weighting. All right, so a slightly higher adjusted score had the requirements in a strong way where it needed them, and that goes across all of them. And then at the very top, you'll get a total score for each of the sections combined. And it's not the average of the 4 sections. It's actually based on a total of the number of points, right? It's using the same methodology that each subsection uses. And then actually, probably a good time to introduce at the bottom, we have a bonus or a penalty section. Inevitably, there's going to be things about each vendor that makes them a little bit different. Or maybe it's some cool feature that you think is pretty attractive that maybe should be a bonus, or there may be something that just isn't quite right, or maybe the vendor rubs you the wrong way, or maybe there's just left a bad taste in your mouth, or I don't know. Actually, here's a couple of examples, right? Like maybe webhooks are interesting to you, or maybe having audience sizing up front before you commit to an audience is a cool feature that you'd like to have. So what you can do down here is you can just kind of ad hoc put in bonuses and penalties based on whatever criteria you want, or something that comes up after you've built either requirements, or something that you just don't want to rate all of the vendors on, but you do want to account for in some way. You may find that there's something in here that is really important to you, and that's where you can try to suss out that emotion a little bit, and try to understand it better. So again, you may see a score before you do the bonus and penalty and say, I don't quite agree with that. Why don't I agree with that? And kind of go through the reasons and then add it in here. And it helps you to kind of rationalize the approach that you're taking. Okay, now let's talk about where you get this information from, because while we've done a lot of this work in terms of laying out a bunch of functionality that you should see in testing and optimization tools, and that's going to be a big shortcut for you. You are going to have to adjust it for your own needs, obviously, but where are you going to get all the information to fill this out? Well, here's where this model can help you a lot. What you basically want to do is put the onus on the vendor to at least take the first pass at providing this information. You can have the vendor take a first pass at providing the score. So this tab, the vendor questionnaire, is what this is designed for. And what you would do is when you have all your requirements laid out, you would paste those into here and just give this worksheet to each vendor, right? And so they can see what is important to you, and you ask them to comment and tell them, hey, look, I want you to be brief, because you're going to get back paragraphs and paragraphs if you don't insist on this. I want you to be brief. This is what give me a 300 character summary of your performance on each of these facets. And this is what 300 characters looks like. Please don't go over the limit. There's instructions here, which you can modify, the instruction on the scale. You can invite the vendor to provide a scale. I guess it's pretty key that you provide a sample response, and you could be more specific in here and kind of put in what you think is the ideal answer to each question, and invite them to measure up to that. But it gives them something to go off of to see kind of what you're looking for in each of those ratings, right? So deliver this over to the vendor, see what you get back, and then fill in the blanks with researching their documentation, with reaching out to your network, with asking more pointed questions to the vendor themselves. But that's really what's going to shorten up the time for you. So one is knowing what you want, right, and having that in a well-structured format. And then two is making sure that you're getting that you're able to evaluate what you want there. So just one more quick thing here. We're going to go through some tips. Again, start with the requirements and then adjust as you go along. Stuff is going to come up inevitably that you didn't think of at the beginning. It's really hard to capture everything on one go. Like I mentioned, include in your requirements gathering developers, network people, IT, security, procurement. The way the process should go, right? You again start with the requirements. After you have the requirements, make some initial contact with the vendor. They're going to want to. They may screen you. They may want to see like where you're at from a readiness perspective. They may want to have a half-hour call, but control that conversation. Don't let it get away from you. Don't overcommit to spending too much time with the vendors up front. Make it clear what your process is going to be. If you want to give up that half hour for that first call, that's fine. Don't let it go into a full demo. And then when you are ready to do a demo, hopefully you've done a little bit of research by that time. You don't feel like you have to have that whole thing filled out, but send them the questionnaire before the demo. Be pretty insistent on it. Vendors really, they want to know how to speak to their tools capabilities in the context of your business. But if you can send them the questionnaire, that should really speak to your use cases and your needs, right? So that should be helpful for them to understand how you're evaluating them. And you should insist that they evaluate their own tool in your context. When you do a demo with the vendor, include as many people as possible. Review the scoring that you've given them or what you've received back from the vendor with the group ahead of time so that they can kind of have a primer and not come into the conversation cold, so that the vendor has to start way at the beginning and go through like the really basic stuff. Even so, they are going to start somewhere close to the beginning. But hopefully you can ask pointed questions and kind of steer the conversation where you have big doubts about things. You want to make sure that when the vendor schedules the demo that they have technical people that can speak to the finer details of the functionality, especially if you have more technical people there or you yourself are going to ask very specific, hard questions. Don't set the vendor up for failure by, asking their account managers, the finer details of how their tool works in a server-side environment where you need Java support and you have to make all decisions in memory or something like that. Another big point here. Okay. Have someone come to the demo or listen into the demo that can take notes, and have them be as detailed with those notes as they possibly can. Word for word if possible. Obviously, you're not going to get word for word, but like really detailed notes. And the reason you do this is because you're going to be exhausted as you go through these demos. Especially if you're doing more than 2-3 of them, and the stuff is gonna blend together. And having really good notes, in a searchable document that you can go back through and kind of refine your scoring is really, really helpful. Be judicious when you add in the bonus and penalty points. Try to combat the part of you that wants to not make a rational choice, that has developed a friendship with one of the sales folks and really doesn't want to let that person down. Try to combat that and try to make a rational decision if you can. Be aware that's not always possible. Again, that's just another note on that. We don't make rational choices. We make emotional choices and then we rationalize them. And finally, be kind, be respectful. Vendors are people too. I realize that, the sales people, their jobs rely on getting you to buy their product. And so they may tend to be self-interested from time to time. The good ones, the ones that have been doing it for a while, they understand that their product is not suitable for every environment. But they're people too. Let's keep the optimization community a strong and a respectful one. Anyways, I hope this was helpful. I think you will find that this will, at the very least, serve as a very strong document to explain your decisions and to, if something costs more than another tool, to go up and have specific reasons why, it's the right tool for your business, and have those conversations with people who were not directly involved in the evaluation. So good luck. If you ever find yourself in need of help, don't hesitate to reach out, and good luck.